Vous savez, vous n'êtes pas obligé de me croire. Mais ne croyez pas non plus Candace Owens. Ne croyez pas, ne prenez pas pour acquis ce que vous disent les gens, y compris moi. Faites vos recherches, recherchez. Ce n'est pas parce que moi je dis que ça c'est noir, que forcément c'est noir. Allez faire vos recherches. Aujourd'hui, il y a Internet. Les messages de Charlie Kirk circulent partout. Faites-vous votre propre avis.
Des décennies qu'ils avaient planifié la mort de Charlie. Regardez Snake Eyes de 98. Il commence par un match de boxe le 10 septembre. Même date que l'exécution de Charlie. Le boxeur s'appelle Tyler, l'exécuteur. Même prénom que le suspect. Et le match est truqué. Un spectateur lui fait un signal pour déclencher l'action. Ce qu'on a vu pendant le discours de Kirk. La cible est touchée à la gorge et elle s'appelle Charles Kirkland. Même prénom et nom de famille. Donc à ce stade, le mot coïncidence, c'est plus une option. Il mentionne aussi une tempête. Et 2 jours avant la mort de Kirk, le magazine Jezebel publie une attaque pour maudire ce misogyne. Le film a été tourné au Trump Taj Mahal. Et dans le script, le financier de l'opération fait référence à Trump. Il possède la reine et fabrique un bouc émissaire terroriste pour se couvrir. Qui hypnotise la foule pour annoncer la nouvelle. Qui transforme les funérailles en rallye MAGA. Le sacrifice devient une renaissance politique. Pour pousser des nouvelles lois anti-crime avec l'IA.
Law enforcement can only be the beginning of our response to Charlie's murder by pioneering an AI verification system.
Et tout ça dans un stade en forme de serpent, comme le titre Snake Eyes, avec le slogan « Croyez tout sauf vos yeux ». C'est ironique, non? Quand on voit Trump et Musk faire le même signe de main maçonnique que sur l'affiche.
Se poser des questions et de reconnaître que oui, dans le monde, il y a des juifs qui font des choses atroces, comme ce sont des êtres humains, juifs ou pas juifs. Évidemment que les juifs tiennent sous contrôle une grande partie de nos sociétés, une grande partie des entreprises qui ont les plus grands contrôles sur ce monde, tout simplement parce que Dieu leur avait promis au peuple juif, Dieu leur a promis de dominer sur tellement de choses dans ce monde. C'est parfaitement biblique, les juifs sont très intelligents et les juifs sont infiltrés partout. Personne ne nie ça. Et donc, de dire ça, ça ne veut pas dire que moi, Marie Vindigni, je me renie sur tout ce que j'ai toujours défendu sur Israël. D'ailleurs, je le dis, là, face caméra, moi, Marie Vindigni, même si j'avoue et je reconnais effectivement, et ce n'est pas un mal, que les Juifs sont présents partout dans nos sociétés et ont un contrôle sur énormément de choses. Moi, Marie Vindigni, je défends Israël. En effet, Candace, tout est spirituel. Tout est d'autant plus spirituel quand il s'agit de combattre ou de défendre Israël. Tout est d'autant plus spirituel dans les temps que nous vivons tant que nous savons être les temps de la fin. Tout est d'autant plus spirituel depuis le début de ce mois de septembre qui a, pour ceux en tout cas qui sont spirituels et qui sont réveillés, incontestablement marqué avec l'accélération de tous ces événements, que ce soit aux États-Unis, que ce soit ici en France ou partout à travers le monde, qui a incontestablement marqué le début des 7 années de tribulation. Une seule vidéo, cette seule vidéo qu'elle a faite pour parler de son ami assassiné Charlie Kirk et donc rallier ce tragique événement qui a bouleversé le monde entier à sa cause anti-Israël et anti-juif, ou plutôt comme elle aime à le dire, anti-sioniste. Cette vidéo va lui... Je sais que Candace Owens va publier d'autres vidéos à ce sujet. Je ne les traduirai, je ne pense pas. Je vais voir ce qu'elle a à dire, je vais voir s'il y a des nouveaux éléments. Je reprendrai la parole si cela est nécessaire. En tout cas, une chose est sûre, c'est que j'en parlerai sur Instagram. Ce sera peut-être pas suffisamment substantiel pour venir rajouter des choses ici sur YouTube, mais j'en parlerai sur Instagram. Et donc, je tiens à être absolument...
Fact is now Bibi and the Israeli hard-right government has a mandate. I gotta be careful the way I say this. They're gonna try to ethnically cleanse Gaza. Yep. I mean, that's, and I don't use that term lightly, okay? They're talking about basically removing 2.5 million people from there, okay? And honestly, they have a mandate to go seek justice and revenge. They do. This idea that they need to have a truce or a peace treaty, that's morally crap after you see women and children be burned alive and dragged to the streets. But there are some serious questions here, Patrick. And let me tell you, my pattern recognition over the last 5 years has become pretty sharp. COVID, Maui fires, Epstein. When I see a story and it doesn't click, our guts are usually right. So I've been to Israel many times. The whole country's a fortress. When I first heard this story, I still have the same gut instinct that I did initially. I find this very hard to believe. I've been to that Gaza border. You cannot go 10 feet without running into a 19-year-old with an AR-15 or an automatic machine gun that's an IDF soldier. Right? The whole country is surveilled. And so let me just kind of go through this. We don't talk about Israeli politics very often, and most Americans don't know this. The last 9 months, Israel was on the brink of civil war. It's not an exaggeration. This judicial stuff, there were hundreds of thousands of Israelis taking to the streets because Bibi Netanyahu was basically redefining the Israeli constitution. That's not an exaggeration, right? He said the judicial branch has too much power. There were protests planned this week against Netanyahu, where they anticipated tens of thousands of people to take to the streets. That's all gone, Patrick. Netanyahu now has an emergency government and a mandate to lead. I'm not willing to go so far that saying that Netanyahu knew or there was intelligence here, but I think some questions need to be asked. Was there a stand down order? Whew. Was there a stand down order? 6 hours? I don't believe it. Israel's the size of New Jersey. When I took a helicopter ride from Jerusalem to the Gaza border, it's 45 minutes. Wow. 6 hours. They're live streaming the killing of Jews. Did somebody in the government say stand down? That is a legitimate, non-conspiracy question. The whole country is the IDF. The whole country is. Yeah. And you're trying to tell me that they're going to concerts and kibbutzes and schools and by reports 6 hours. Let's say it's 3 hours.
That's suspect. Go ahead, Rob.
It's also not like a right-wing reporting. This is from the New York Times. The long wait for help as massacre unfolds in Israel.
9
I can't think of a more liberal news outlet than the New York Times.
And by the way, I'm actually very pro-Israel. So let me be very, so I'm not exactly.
I think we all are.
No, I just want to make sure my position is clear here. But so Patrick, there are other explanations. It's possible that the Netanyahu government was double-crossed by bad agents. Okay? That's dark, but it's not as dark as what we're talking about.
He suggested that Mossad may have allowed the attack to happen deliberately to give Netanyahu a blank check for his ethnic cleansing campaign. That's not something you say without making enemies in Tel Aviv.
The American Jewish Committee called in a statement Charlie Kirk an anti-Semite and, quote, dangerous. Charlie Kirk, an anti-Semite.
My moral character is now being put into question, Megan. Not my decisions. Not like, hey, are you doing this? Is it smart or is it dumb? But no, I am a bad person if I do this.
Tucker Carlson has just confirmed what Candace Owens has been saying all along about Charlie Kirk's relationship with Israel and with Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. Listen closely to this.
2 days before he died, he lost a $2 million donation because he had publicly pledged to bring me to the next Turning Point conference in December. And he told me over the past couple of months he was losing a lot of donations over that pledge. They put out a flyer basically saying that I was going to be at this event giving a speech. And so he would text me and say, man, I'm really taking a lot of heat for this, and people are really mad. The American Jewish Committee called in a statement Charlie Kirk an anti-Semite and, quote, dangerous. Charlie Kirk, an anti-Semite. Yeah. He was not an anti-Semite. He was the opposite, and he was not dangerous. He was a great lover of people and a purveyor of peace. He was the opposite. And he was very stung by that. Those of us who've been called names for a long time are a little bit harder to offend. Charlie was deeply offended by that and expressed some of those feelings on Megyn Kelly's show and in other places. But that did not let up. The reason I'm telling this story is because he called me and then came to see me at my house about this topic. And I said to him every single time, look, I've got my own way to communicate my views. This is actually not the most important issue to me. There are lots of things I can talk about. I don't need to come to Turning Point. I can take a year off, no problem. I hated seeing how much he was suffering.
But that wasn't the full story. Tucker went further and explained how Charlie himself struggled with Netanyahu's leadership and the direction of Israeli policy. Take a listen.
He did not like Bibi Netanyahu, and he said that to me many times, and he said it to people around him many times. He felt that Bibi Netanyahu was a very destructive force. He was appalled by what was happening in Gaza. He was, above all, resentful that he believed Netanyahu was using the United States to prosecute his wars for the benefit of his country. and that it was shameful and embarrassing and bad for the United States, and he resented it. Didn't hate Netanyahu. He wasn't out there with a placard saying that, but he certainly expressed that to me and a lot of other people. And there's no question that Bibi's defenders on the internet will call me a liar or a kook, but that's a fact. And enough text messages exist that I think it can probably be verified in pretty short order. Not that it needs to be, because that is true. Shortly after that speech, there was a very intense attack on Charlie, and to some extent on me, not that I really noticed. But on him, I have no donors. He had $100 million worth of donors. And so, because he was involved in a different project from just yapping on the internet, which is what I do for a living, he was dependent to a great extent on his donors, of course. It's a nonprofit. And they went after him and tormented him. Not all, of course. Many were supportive, but the ones who were offended by my speech, and there was a small, very intense group who were, tormented Charlie Kirk until the day he died.
When you put Tucker's words together, it becomes clear that Candace Owens was not exaggerating. She was telling the truth. She has been outspoken about how certain conversations are shut down the moment you question Israel's leadership, and how labels like anti-Semitism are used to silence honest debate. Now Tucker has shown that Charlie Kirk, a man who dedicated his life to building institutions and reaching young people, was quietly facing the same storm. Charlie was not hateful. He was not bitter. He was a man who loved people and cared deeply about the country he served. Yet because he dared to question Netanyahu's decisions, especially regarding Gaza and America's role in those conflicts, he was branded unfairly and punished financially. Tucker tells us that donors pulled away, that the attacks never stopped, and that Charlie carried that weight until the very end. This is exactly the pattern Candace Owens has been describing. The problem is not that people disagree. Disagreement is natural in a democracy. The problem is when disagreement is no longer allowed, when raising a concern about policy is twisted into an attack on an entire people. That's not only dishonest, it's destructive. Tucker Carlson has now confirmed it. Candace Owens was right. Charlie Kirk's story is a sobering reminder of how much it can cost to speak with conviction in an age where powerful interests control the boundaries of debate. And for anyone watching, especially those of us who are older and have seen this cycle repeat across decades, it's a lesson worth remembering. When truth is punished, society loses something far greater than money or reputation. It loses courage.
How did these guys not know this was taking place?
So I've been to Israel many times. The whole country's a fortress. When I first heard this story, I still had the same gut instinct that I did initially. I find this very hard to believe. I've been to that Gaza border. You cannot go 10 feet without running into a 19-year-old with an AR-15 or an automatic machine gun that's an IDF soldier. Right? The whole country is surveilled. And so let me just kind of go through this. We don't talk about Israeli politics very often, and most Americans don't know this. The last 9 months, Israel was on the brink of civil war. It's not an exaggeration. This judicial stuff, there were hundreds of thousands of Israelis taking to the streets because Bibi Netanyahu was basically redefining the Israeli constitution. That's not an exaggeration, right? He said the judicial branch has too much power. There were protests planned this week against Netanyahu, where they anticipated tens of thousands of people to take to the streets. That's all gone, Patrick. Netanyahu now has an emergency government and a mandate to lead. I'm not willing to go so far that saying that Netanyahu knew or there was intelligence here, but I think some questions need to be asked. Was there a stand down order? Was there a stand down order? 6 hours? I don't believe it. Israel's the size of New Jersey. When I took a helicopter ride from Jerusalem to the Gaza border, it's 45 minutes. Wow. 6 hours. They're live streaming the killing of Jews. Did somebody in the government say stand down? That is a legitimate, non-conspiracy question.
I'm not suicidal, and if anything happens to me, it's not an accident.
If any harm comes to us, it was definitely Israel.
I'm an American. I'm proud to be an American. I'm not an Israeli. There's no law on the books that indicates that I have to support Israel in any way, shape, or form. Over the weekend, I noticed that I have become a target of one of these pro-Israeli groups. It's a shadowy group, doesn't disclose who it's funded by. It's called Canary Mission.
So now there's a pro-Israel group inside America that is encouraging death threats against Americans. Well, you came to the wrong place, brothers and sisters. I'll double down what Anna said. If any harm comes to us, it was definitely Israel. Not one person from mainstream media will cover this. Not one government official will care. If you're threatening murder Christians or Muslims or anyone else in this country, They don't care.
No, they don't.
They don't. But if you insult someone who's pro-Israeli,